This is an update regarding the case that is currently being requested for dismissal. Uh, this is regarding the threats and extremist activity which has been reported over various years. So this is being recorded. Uh, the screen being recorded is a device which has already been openly exposed and made accessible to authorities for multiple years now. This device is also compromised and has undergone various security operations, from recovering data and analyzing data for intrusions. All of these events have been documented and they have been saved and recorded on multiple storage devices in various locations, including decentralized storage options on different blockchains and places beyond the simple clear net or the basic transparent internet with standard HTTP. So these are excerpts from communications which have already been sent off regarding reports which were reported. Uh, these things were reported to various authorities, including the woman uh, involved in the case for the torture. And so, to summarize, there were a variety of wrongdoings which were reported, which were directly relevant for public safety and national security. Um, some of the events involved in this include a self-described extremist group, which had been reported going all the way back in 2020. There was further contact from other individuals who had made direct or indirect contact with such groups, which was more or less unprovoked, which provided further implication as to active and current dangers and threats. Now, one of the things, one of the other things this involves as well. So after these reports were made, it was falsified and misrepresented that these things were, one, unprovable, but two, also things that should not be believed. All of the things reported in these documents were verifiable. A lot of these events occurred on camera with video recordings, which typically were saved for at least 3 years. Now, the woman, the authority that these were directly reported to, some of these events, she refused, and her entire team refused to ever check any of the video evidence, even though a team working side by side with them at the same time from the beginning had actually already been in contact with the manager of an apartment building where some of this video evidence existed. That same apartment building made it difficult to recover the video evidence, and also caused some financial issues with things that they had already been in the wrong on, which are actually inside of my actual credit reports and disputes, which tend to be saved for at least 5 years. Now it should be just getting to the point where it's coming up on 5 years for those credit reports and documents to possibly no longer be saved, particularly with Credit Karma, where some of these reportings regarding these agencies and these security issues involving an apartment unit were disputed and discussed with. Now, part of what happened during the initial reporting of these occurrences was not only did the woman refuse to report them to her agency or to her superiors um, in a proper manner, but she also went above and beyond, and with her team questioned they questioned that if such great harm to society had been occurring and such dangers were present, that as long as things were intact for the team themselves, it might provide an insight that there may be a greater margin of error where they could um, instill their own harm. So, after these reports were made regarding these threats and dangers and these self reported terror groups in a self reported terror cell, this individual went above and beyond and chose to attempt to cause car accidents in the city of Houston, particularly on the highways such as 610 and 288, in the particularly fastest locations of these highways on the straightways. So the woman intentionally tried to prevent myself from safely traveling, prevent myself from being able to be awake and to not be distracted while traveling, and also put me in a position where I was forced to have to travel relatively regularly. Um, so a lot of this evidence has already been um, communicated to various individuals. Um, this evidence has also been published, some of it, especially with regards to the context of the woman's own endangerment and intentional harm and battery and assaults. This evidence itself uh, was particularly published on public blockchains. So that way, the compromised computing devices and the compromised communications with individuals such as lawyers would not prevent the evidence itself from being retained. And so that the legitimate threat to society that these women constituted would not simply be allowed to be shoved under the rug and ignored despite all of the threats and attempts at harm and battery, abduction, and otherwise done to myself and presented to myself. This is a URL down here for Accord, which is a decentralized hosting service on Arweave, which is now sunset and no longer active. Um, there is a vault which had quite a few different documents online. Um, it is not easily accessible now, but the data is on the blockchain, and this is the transaction in the background on the actual blockchain explorer. Now, part of these threats as well constitute a group which has threatened the city council in the town that this campaign of attacks from this woman started in. Um, the town itself was warned, as well as other groups of people who were being targeted by demographic and who were threatened based on their protected class status for both religion and race. Um, they were both, or there were multiple entities who were warned. The woman herself also, against her team's own warnings and discouragement, took up on some of these reports for extremist violence and their plans for extremist violence, and attempted to use them for her own attacks. Um, Now, part of what has occurred is this woman has been interrupting with communications uh, to private individuals as well as legal services. So, one of the things that has occurred is this individual has started a campaign which he has now passed off like a baton to another group of SS7 attacks, which attacked the back end of my phone communications. So between my phone and the cell tower, there is interference, and there's likely interference uh, from the cell tower into the provider's network as well. This has caused recent issues with my case, which I have just requested to have dismissed without prejudice, for my ability to actually contact lawyers. So I've had phone calls with lawyers recently. Um, some of my phone calls will ring maybe for half a ring, maybe for half a second, a full second, and stop with no continued ringing. There are other times in the past years where my phone has been on a call, which has dropped off, but remained active on the other side of the phone call, either in a group call or an individual call, where people believed that I was still on the line, and some people even believed that I was still actively speaking or engaging. And the reverse is true as well, with other parties being dropped off the line and myself being kept on. This has continued on with my lawyers, actually, or my legal uh, counsel consulting, where when requesting legal counsel or speaking to lawyers I've already previously engaged with, they have had their communications cut off. One lawyer in particular recently had a child, was contacted after meeting with the lawyer, and after she was contacted following our last discussion over the phone, she gave the implication that she was disinterested in getting involved in the case at all due to her recent starting of a family, as if there was a physical threat or mortal threat present, due to the individuals that the woman, the defendant in the case, filed, decided to bring in. Now, I have evidence of all of these events, including the reported extremist violence and terror cells, going back to 2020. The initial report started in 2020, and recently, getting closer to 2025, have picked up significantly. And in this year alone, things have drastically increased in severity, as is stated in the case. Let's see, there is quite a bit of information here that I am being relatively careful to sift through, as there are names, addresses, and other identifiable information. Now, part of what this woman has done is this woman has attacked a project I was working on, actually multiple. One of these projects, the founder of the project a was working on getting a novel, low-cost, affordable cancer treatment put onto the market. Now, this novel cancer treatment was estimated to, let's pull up a calculator. This novel cancer treatment was estimated to come in at around, let's see, this novel cancer treatment was estimated to come in at around a 5% efficacy rate in terms of how many cases it would potentially be completely effective for, to the point of remission, and 100% in terms of the yearly save time, in terms of the extra year of life that you typically measure cancer patient treatments with. Now, if we were to look at the yearly rate, let's see. So this is the U.S., United States yearly cancer deaths. And this treatment was low cost enough to be able to also be low cost in developing nations and nations with much, much cheaper economies. Um, Even nations with small economies that were small, cheap economies. So, cheap economies with low buying power and low scale, to the effect that they would likely not be able to make a deal outside of something backed by a central bank. Um, let's see. So, in 2025, so in 2025, there are 618,000. So obviously, the rate increases every year. It's increasing exponentially, just like with population. But let's see, we would say 2020 U.S. cancer deaths. Now, this may have been 2020, 2021. The specific dates and times are all documented. Okay, so in 2020, there are 606,000 people. So if we take our 5% rate that this was estimated to be efficacious for, and let's do 600, let's do 606, it's closer to 666, which makes a lot more sense of a number in terms of matching this case. So we get about 30,000. So this was the number that I came up with before. So we have, and this figure is provided by the American Cancer Society, Centers for Disease Control. So this doesn't necessarily mean that cancer was completely determined to be the cause, but by whatever criteria that this organization uses, it's determined to be a foundational cause of the death, or the primary cause. Now, we can take this, and so just for reference, it takes around 10 to 15,000 deaths to constitute a massacre historically. Massacre minimum number. But that's just a massacre within a year. So you take this 30,000. So every year, so every 3 years, they're a little over 3 years, about something like, so if you take this divided by 12, I think it's something like 14 months, right? So 2,500, let's see, 2,500. We're gonna do, so we got about 40 months. And what is that? It's not an extra 4, not an extra 2, an extra 4 months. I get you 200,000. But if we were going to say yearly death of increase, so it's on average about 1.7. So 1.7 deaths, or 1.7 deaths year over year increase compounded. So when you take that 30K number and you do times 1.07, and we're gonna say to the 5th, right? To the 5th. Well, we're going into the 6th year. Let's say we're 3.5 years into this. 1.07 to the 3.5. Oh, sorry, it's not 1.07. Let's go. 1.0. 1.017 gonna say to the 3.5. So we're about 6% up, right? Let's see. Compound interest calculator. So initially we start out with 30,300 monthly contribution. Interest rate of and we're 3.5 and compounded annually. 3.3. So let's see. Six, 39, 31. So in a couple of years, we should be at 32,000 per year. We started off at 30,000. So let's see. So this would be, our interest rate would be 100, right? Wouldn't it? Well, let's look at our numbers. So we got 30,300, right? 3,300 plus. And I will add that this cancer treatment was already tested. Its inventor had cancer and was actively using it for himself. This was not just some random, um, probabilistically effective, or I guess everything is probabilistically effective. This was not just some home remedy or some treatment that just happened to either align with things naturally declining or that just happened to trip some sort of biological tripwire and result in that individual getting better. This was developed by somebody who did the entire scientist, had an entire lab set up at his home, who had some form of tongue cancer, had gone through surgeries, lost pieces of his tongue. Somebody who had been through the full gamut of everything that occurs with these diseases, and someone who spent basically all of their free time figuring out a solution that they were poised to share with the world and the nation. So now let's see. Let's add this all up and see what we get. 30. And then, and so my work beyond this has actually been, I was already focused in areas like this. I was attempting to assist with cancer treatment distribution and this woman's torture and harassment and business interference, which was particularly aimed at stopping this. Now, this cancer in particular, this cancer treatment was particularly disrupted by the woman's supervisor, whom she encouraged and created the environment for her to be incentivized or agitated to do this. Let's add our last number. We're adding 31. Okay, let's go back through this. So this was, let's see, 30.3 plus 30.6 plus 30.9 plus 31.2, 2 plus 31.4, 31.3, 3, let's just say minus that, 62466. Okay, so right now we're looking at around 154,000 deaths in the US alone. When you actually add it all up, if you were to go yearly, let's see, global annual deaths. Let's say, okay, let's see, global annual cancer deaths for, let's start this at 2021 to 2020. Let's see. So when we break this down into annual deaths, so in the US alone, we're looking at 150, between 150 up to 160,000. And that 5% number on the treatment efficacy was the low end. Now, there's a chance, maybe that treatment is only half as effective in the real world as it was predicted to be. Maybe it was only 20%. But if you go 10% of this is over the minimum threshold of being considered an historical massacre. Now, one of the things that has also occurred here is the woman leading this team and the other people she has brought in to enact all this violence. Part of what they have done is cause concern and reach up to ears over their heads to manufacture what's considered fragmented evidence and to intentionally try and generate these very manufactured artificial reports to debase myself, to prevent these reports from getting anywhere, to prevent themselves from being ever held liable for any damage, and to effectively just silence everything. So part of that actually resulted in them multiple times through the woman's team herself, which she is the team leader of, and the other team she's brought in, is directly running into other intelligence and clandestine operations that exist outside of their agencies and entities that they work for, and completely outside of their actual direct chain of command. To the point that they have assessed random things as being concerning and of interest, going all the way to the council itself. But they have not actually ever dug directly into the raw data, including the things that should have been verified years ago and validated, even if it was just to disprove a claim. Let's see. So when you look at it globally, this is what we're looking at, right? So let's start up a chart. I had a depth chart before. We can make a depth chart on the spreadsheets. Let's see. And in doing this woman has also caused hundreds of thousands, going probably closer to the millions now, of damages across businesses, things that I've owned or things that I had a vested stake in for either equity or that I contracted with, and not just in the US, but also across other countries. I believe one company in particular, there were about $180,000 to $220,000 worth of damages, maybe 225 worth of blockchain damages based in, I believe, Singapore. either Singapore or Indonesia. Let's see. Let's just call this the massacre chart. Now, keep you in mind that these, all these sorts of nefarious actions are given this general blanket acceptance by the public, as well as with these individual charters for these entities in terms of their actual corporate bodies. So, all right, let's. Okay, let's start the depth chart. So these are going to be these are going to be, this is US, this is US, this is global. Now, we're going to go, and I'll also add that my legal advising on this started back some years ago from some former, or maybe at the time, people who were official legal counsel in the legal sides of one of these publicly known intelligence agencies. You could think of your agencies, the regular feds, if you will. Even down to the point of doing things to, or rather stating things directly to attempt to pique interest, even to the point of, at times, possibly embarrassing or angering the group which the woman led. All of this is documented. So even questions as to that, which were repeatedly asked, were documented, written down. And there's also been some evidence destruction. My former laptop was destroyed. I was informed that the capability to blow out capacitors was present. I actually have a camera. Let's see. I actually have a camera somewhere. Now, this camera had a plastic body. It was a Reolink camera. It had a plastic body, and basically its internal board was exposed electromagnetically. The same is true with my laptop. My laptop, which is actually documented in one of these notes that I have pulled up before, this laptop had a plastic body as well. The camera was brand new, just stopped working. The laptop, I actually heard the capacitor pop. It actually blew out while I was using it and then turned off. I heard an explosion inside of the case. Now, let's see. So when we do our test, we're going to count the year, right? So we're going to count the, let's just count by actual dates. This was 2021, and so you'll be able to actually count this for your own state. Maybe these should actually be reversed, right? So Okay. And we could do states here, we can do whatever. So when we actually check this, let's see. We can get rid of this and we can just take the raw numbers themselves. I was just showing that to show the acceleration. And we can assume that these deaths have likely gone up as things have gotten more expensive, become more unhealthy, and people are generally just stressed out more. Let's see if that's actually the case. So 9.9 million. One. Say diagnosed, it said. Okay, let's see. Global should be deaths by year. All right. Let's see. We just want to take these from the same data source. Maybe it's just wrong. Let's see. Okay, so there we go. Cancers. Cancers World 2021. We have this many. So we don't even have cancer deaths beyond this, do we? Causes of death. Causes of death in 2024 only goes up to 2021. Cancer deaths 2022. 3. It's interesting, it's so hard to find that global number. The top results are all outdated. It's probably because people more or less search for the particular kind they have. Or for treatment more than they do general information. Cancer statistics. Now, these numbers are also partially inflated just due to the time of year when this was disrupted. Because more likely than not, treatment would have started being distributed around 2022, probably at least maybe Q1 2022. Of course, all of these have to be taken with a grain of salt. It is interesting. It's harder to find this through an AI. You'd think that they would use a centralized source. This doesn't seem like the kind of statistic it will be hard to find anything on. Let's see. Yearly cancer deaths. Because we know what it is in the US, right? We can punch this in. So we know that this is 30,300. 30,300. Let's see. Find yearly cancer deaths in US 2021 to 2024. And it also might be because some of these countries require a lot more estimating to actually, either estimating or investigating to get any decent number on. So, yeah, this, that's a projection, an estimate. We use this as our, let's say 2021, it was this, right? So if we were to chart this, These are our numbers. Let's see. Insert chart. So this would be like let's go from the save potential to saved, and let's see. So well, actually, let's move this up here. Insert chart, and want a cumulative, like a line chart. Like all right. So this is what we look like. Wow, it looks pretty bad on the chart. I guess as the population ages, this should increase in terms of the actual change in the rate itself. But yeah, so if you were to break it down by these numbers, things haven't increased as much as they were expected to. So instead of that 154 number, we're looking at 122,000, which is still drastic. So anything over 10,000 is the low end of a massacre. So with maybe 10% of projected effectiveness with the real world treatment results, this might be still underdoing the massacre, but coming up on a massacre in, I guess, maybe 1 to 2 years. Let's see the U.S. cancer